Welcome to today's Catholic Daily Readings from Christus Dominus Bread of Life. A reading from the first book of Samuel. Then Samuel said to Saul, "Permit me, and I will reveal to you what the Lord has said to me this night." And he said to him, "Speak." And Samuel said, "Was it not when you were little in your own eyes that you were made the head of the tribes of Israel? And the Lord anointed you as king over Israel. And the Lord sent you on the way, and he said, Go and put to death the sinners of Amalek, and you shall fight against them, even unto utter annihilation. Why then did you not listen to the voice of the Lord? Instead, you turned to the spoils, and you did evil in the eyes of the Lord." And Saul said to Samuel, "On the contrary, I did listen to the voice of the Lord, and I walked in the way along which the Lord sent me, and I led back Agag, the king of Amalek, and I put to death Amalek. But the people took some of the spoils, sheep and oxen, as the first fruits of those things that were slain, to immolate to the Lord their God at Gilgal." And Samuel said, "Does the Lord want holocausts and victims, and not instead that the voice of the Lord should be obeyed? For obedience is better than sacrifice, and to heed is greater than to offer the fat of rams. Therefore it is like the sin of paganism to rebel, and it is like the crime of idolatry to refuse to obey. For this reason, therefore, because you have rejected the word of the Lord has also rejected you from being king."
Not for sacrifice you call me, nor the smoke upon the air. The offering stands before you, but my heart is not yet there. You ask no bull from my fold, no gold from out my pen. You seek the truth I cast aside, and call me back again. To the upright I will show the saving power of God, not in ritual, not in disguise, but the path that walks with God. To the upright I will show the saving power of God. Why do you speak my covenant while throwing my words away? You learn my lore upon your lips, but you would not obey. You thought my silence was consent, that I was just like you. But now I place your deeds in light and show you what is true. To the upright I will show the saving power of God, not the offering you choose for me, but the heart that fears my word. To the upright I will show the saving power of God. Obedience stands where sacrifice falls. The listening heart outlives them all. Praise is the offering that breaks the lie, the sacrifice that glorifies. To the upright I will show the saving power I will show. I will show the saving power of God.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. And the disciples of John and the Pharisees were fasting. And they arrived and said to him, Why do the disciples of John and of the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast? And Jesus said to them, How can the sons of the wedding fast while the groom is still with them? During whatever time they have the groom with them, they are not able to fast. But the days will arrive when the groom will be taken away from them, and then they shall fast in those days. No one sews a patch of new cloth onto an old garment. Otherwise, the new addition pulls away from the old, and the tear becomes worse. And no one puts new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise, the wine will burst the wineskins, and the wine will pour out, and the wineskins will be lost. Instead, new wine must be put into new wineskins. Join us for today's reflection. We are masters at finding loopholes. Watch any child negotiate bedtime rules. Watch any adult justify a questionable expense on their taxes. Watch any employee explain why the policy does not quite apply to their particular situation. We are endlessly creative when it comes to technical compliance while missing the entire point. Saul had just finished what should have been a straightforward mission. God told him through Samuel to completely destroy the Amalekites and everything they owned. Total destruction, no exceptions. And Saul did attack them. He did win the battle. He did kill most of the people, but he kept King Agag alive as a trophy. And those really nice sheep and cattle, it would be wasteful to destroy perfectly good livestock. Besides, Saul had a brilliant idea. He would sacrifice them to God. He took what God commanded him to destroy and repackaged it as worship. This was not outright rebellion in his mind. This was creative obedience. This was finding a better way to honor God than what God had actually asked for. Samuel arrives and Saul greets him with the confidence of a man who has just aced an exam. "The Lord bless you," he says. "I have carried out the Lord's command." And Samuel, with the driest delivery in all of Scripture, responds with a single devastating question. "Then what is this bleating of sheep in my ears? What is this lowing of cattle that I hear?" There is no good answer to that question. There is only the sound of Saul's religious loophole collapsing around him. Samuel's response cuts through every excuse we have ever made for ourselves. Does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obeying the voice of the Lord? To obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed is better than the fat of rams. For rebellion is like the sin of divination, and arrogance like the evil of idolatry. Read that last line again slowly. Rebellion equals divination. Arrogance equals idolatry. Samuel is not using hyperbole. He is diagnosing what actually happens in the human heart when we decide we know better than God. When I choose my interpretation of what God wants over what God actually said, I am not being creative or spiritual or wise. I am practicing a subtle form of witchcraft, bending spiritual reality to serve my will instead of bowing my will to serve spiritual reality. When I elevate my judgment above God's clear command, I am not being thoughtful. I am building an idol, and that idol is myself. The psalm drives this home with uncomfortable precision. God speaks to those who recite his statutes and take his covenant on their lips while hating discipline and casting his words behind them. "You thought I was one like yourself," God says through the psalmist. "You assumed that because I was silent, I approved. You mistook my patience for agreement." This is the great danger of religious sophistication. The more we know about God, the more creatively we can rationalize our disobedience. The Pharisees were not ignorant. They were experts. They could quote chapter and verse while completely missing the heart of the one who wrote it. Which brings us to the gospel. where Jesus faces the same accusation from a different angle. Why do your disciples not fast like John's disciples fast? Why are you not following the established patterns of serious religious practice? And Jesus answers with three images that would have shocked his audience: a bridegroom at his own wedding feast, new cloth that will shrink and tear old garments, new wine that will burst old wineskins. Jesus is not patching the old system. He is not improving on an existing framework. He is inaugurating something so radically new that trying to squeeze it into the old categories will destroy both the old and the new. The presence of God Himself in human flesh cannot be contained by fasting schedules designed for His absence. The explosive joy of the kingdom cannot be poured into brittle containers shaped by waiting and longing. Here is where Saul's story and Jesus' teaching collide in the most unexpected way. Saul tried to stuff obedience into the container of sacrifice. He thought he could take what God commanded and improve upon it with religious activity. The Pharisees tried to stuff the Messiah into the container of existing practice. They thought they could evaluate Jesus by measuring him against John the Baptist's disciples. Both groups made the same fundamental error. They assumed they understood God well enough to edit him. The bridegroom image Jesus uses is not accidental. Throughout the Old Testament, God describes himself as Israel's husband. The prophets speak of Israel's unfaithfulness as adultery. Now Jesus stands in front of religious leaders and calls himself the bridegroom. He is claiming to be the one Israel has been waiting for, the one whose presence changes everything, the one who makes fasting during the wedding feast not pious but absurd. When the real thing shows up, our substitutes become obstacles. This is why Saul's creative sacrifice was worse than simple neglect would have been. It was not that he forgot God's command. He remembered it perfectly. He just decided his version was better. He wrapped disobedience in religious language and expected God to be impressed by his spiritual innovation. We do this constantly. We tithe but withhold forgiveness. We attend Mass but nurse grudges in our hearts. We recite prayers but ignore the poor on our doorstep. We build elaborate spiritual practices while the simple commands go undone. Love your neighbor. Forgive those who wrong you. Speak the truth. Care for the vulnerable. Visit the sick and imprisoned. Feed the hungry. Jesus is not interested in our religious innovations. He is not looking for creative interpretations of his commands. He is looking for surrender. Complete, uncomplicated, expensive surrender. The new wine he offers will burst any container we try to control it with. His presence does not fit our categories. His demands exceed our negotiations. His grace overwhelms our careful calculations of what we owe him. Stop trying to improve upon what God has asked. Stop looking for loopholes in the commands you find inconvenient. Stop assuming his silence means divine approval. The bridegroom has arrived. The feast is ready. The question is whether you will come on his terms or spend your life trying to negotiate better ones.